My name is Amina, and I was 18 when my life split in two. The day I got accepted into my dream university was supposed to be the happiest of my life. I ran home, clutching the acceptance letter like a golden ticket, heart pounding, eyes wet. I thought my parents would be proud, excited even, but they didn't smile. My father didn't even look at me properly. My mother just stared at the kitchen tiles as if she hadn't heard me. And then they said the words that changed everything. "You're on your own." I froze. "What?" "You wanted this, right?" My father said flatly. "We never told you to apply. If you want to go to university, figure it out yourself. We're not paying a single rupee." I laughed nervously. "Is this a joke?" My mother gave a cold smile. "You always act like you know everything. Let's see how smart you really are." I didn't cry right away. I remember standing there, shoes still on, backpack on my shoulders, the letter trembling in my hand. I had imagined this moment so many times, how they'd hug me, take photos, maybe even throw a little party. Instead, I stood there in silence, my dreams shattering quietly in the background. It wasn't like we were poor. My father had 2 cars. My mother wore gold bangles every Eid. But they always treated education like a luxury, not a necessity, especially for a girl. "Get married," my father said a week later. "That's your future. You don't need a degree for that." I moved out with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of stubbornness. I rented a tiny room above a bakery, the air always thick with the smell of burnt sugar and old bread. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing, tutoring, even folding clothes at a retail store, to pay for night classes. I slept 4 hours a night. I walked instead of taking buses. I starved on days I had to buy books. But I survived. For 10 years I didn't go home. They didn't call, and I didn't either. I graduated with honors, got a job at a tech firm, moved to another city, slowly built a life from the ashes they left me in. I bought my first car at 25, my own apartment at 27. No loans, no debt. Just grit and fury. Now at 28, I stood in front of the old house again. My hands didn't tremble this time. I wore a crisp black suit. My hair was neat, my heels high, my heart quiet. I knocked once. My father opened the door. He didn't recognize me for a second, and when he did, he blinked like he was seeing a ghost. "Amina." I smiled politely. "Hello, Abu." Silence. Then he stepped aside slowly, confused, unsure. The living room looked exactly the same. Same sofa, same dusty clock. My mother sat with a Quran in her lap, and when she looked up, her eyes widened. I sat calmly across from them. "I just wanted to say thank you," I said. "For what?" my mother whispered. "For kicking me out." They looked at each other, stunned. "If you hadn't refused to help me, I would have never become the woman I am today. I would have never learned how strong I really was. I'm not here to make peace. I'm not here to cry. I just wanted to show you who you left behind, and who she became." And then I stood up. They didn't say anything. They couldn't. Their silence wasn't painful anymore. It was validation. I walked out of that house taller than ever. But that wasn't the end. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my younger cousin sobbing. "Your father's in the hospital," she said. "He had a heart attack. Your mother keeps saying your name." My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with confusion. After everything, now they needed me? I took a deep breath, and I went anyway. When I walked into the hospital room, my father looked fragile, nothing like the man who once told me to figure it out myself. My mother was clutching his hand like a lifeline. "Amina," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just looked at them, old, tired, broken. "Will you forgive us?" my father finally said, voice shaking. I closed my eyes. 10 years. 10 years of loneliness. 10 years of hard work, sleepless nights, crushed hopes, and quiet victories. 10 years without a family. "I'm not angry anymore," I said quietly. "But forgiveness? That's something I'm still working on. Their eyes welled up. I didn't become independent because I wanted to. I became independent because you left me no choice. The room fell silent, and then I walked out. But this time, I didn't cry, because finally, I was free. 2 months passed after that hospital visit, and I heard nothing. No calls, no messages, just silence again. But this time, it didn't sting. I was no longer that desperate 18-year-old girl waiting for validation. I was a woman who had survived the storm they threw me into. I continued my work, leading a product launch that brought our company its highest profits in 2 years. I was promoted. And yet, despite all this, part of me still felt unfinished. One rainy Thursday evening, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my apartment, a hot cup of chai in hand, watching the drops hit the concrete like a steady rhythm of memories. That's when the doorbell rang. It was my younger brother, Ali. I hadn't seen him in years. He was still in school when I left. Now he stood before me, a tall, broad-shouldered man, eyes tired but familiar. We stared at each other for a long moment before I stepped aside. "You've changed," he said, sitting on the couch like he belonged there. "So have you," I replied. He looked around, clearly impressed. My place wasn't flashy, but it was clean, elegant, and mine. "I wanted to say something," he said after a pause. "After you left, things got worse. The house went quiet. Ami cried every night for the first year. Abu got angrier. I wanted to leave too." I swallowed hard. "But you didn't." "No, I couldn't. They kept saying, 'Don't end up like Amina.' But deep down, I wanted to." His voice cracked slightly. "I started working part-time, saved up. I'm in college now, 2nd year, studying economics." My eyes widened slightly. "Really?" He nodded. "You inspired me. Even if they won't admit it, you did." I looked at him closely for the first time. There was sincerity in his voice, a weight behind his eyes. He wasn't here to guilt me. He was here to bridge a broken path. "I'm proud of you," I said. That night, we talked for hours. About life. About what he remembered from those early years. About how Ami's bitterness was rooted in her own upbringing, her own forced sacrifices. How Abu carried his ego like a shield to hide his fear of irrelevance in a changing world. "They didn't know how to love us the right way," Ali said softly. I looked out the window, heart heavy. "But we paid the price." He nodded slowly. Before he left, he said, "They're not asking for money. They're not even asking for you to come home. They just want to talk. They're sorry, Amina. They really are." I said nothing. He stood up, lingering at the door. "I'll never forget what you did. You showed me what strength looks like." And then he left. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if closure ever truly exists, or if we just keep stitching our wounds until they stop bleeding. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, just a plain white envelope with my name written in neat Urdu script. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, handwritten. It was from Ami. "Amina, there is no excuse for what we did. I used to pray for you every night, but I never had the courage to call. You are stronger than me, better than me. I didn't know how to support you without losing control. I thought I was protecting you by making you tough. But I see now, I was just afraid of your light outshining ours. I am proud of you. If you ever feel ready, I would love to have you over. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to give you the love I should have given 10 years ago. Yours, Ami." I held the letter to my chest. I didn't cry. Not yet. But a part of me healed that day. Because even if they failed me then, they were trying now. And that mattered. It didn't erase the past. But maybe, just maybe, it could help build something new. I didn't rush. I didn't call back right away or write a response. I let the letter sit on my nightstand for days, rereading it every night before bed like a quiet ritual. Part of me was still guarding the scars they gave me, afraid that opening the door again might reopen the wound. But another part, smaller quieter, yet persistent, whispered that healing doesn't always come with distance. Sometimes it comes from returning on your terms. A week later, I found myself driving through the same narrow streets I once walked with blistered feet and a heart full of rage. The houses looked smaller now, or maybe I had just grown. I parked outside the house I once called home. The door opened before I knocked. It was Ami. She looked older than I remembered, grayer, thinner, her eyes lined with regret. She didn't smile. She didn't rush to hug me. She just stepped aside, like she was afraid even a gesture might push me away. I stepped in. The same furniture, the same clock ticking loudly above the dusty photo frames. But the energy was different now, quieter, softer, almost like the house itself was holding its breath. "Can I make you chai?" Ami asked, voice trembling. I nodded. In the kitchen, I noticed her hands were shaking as she poured water into the kettle. I moved beside her without a word and took the spoon from her hand. She paused, watching me stir the tea like she didn't believe what was happening. "Where's Abu?" I asked. "In his room. He doesn't come out much these days." I sipped the tea and sat in the living room while Ami joined me slowly. We didn't talk about the past, not directly. Instead, we talked about small things, her plants, my work, the weather. But underneath every sentence was a deep ocean of unsaid things, regret, pain, guilt, and love too stubborn to admit itself. After an hour, I stood up. I should go. She nodded, her eyes moist. "Will you come again?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. She nodded again, accepting it like a sentence she had long expected. I walked to the door, and then I paused, turned. "I kept the first envelope you gave me," I said. "The university acceptance letter. I still have it. Crumpled and stained, but I kept it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't try to hide them. "You deserved better," she whispered. "I became better, in spite of everything." She covered her mouth with her dupatta, sobbing quietly. And I left. But this time, the door didn't close on pain. It closed on something like peace. Over the next few months, visits became occasional, sometimes with Ali, sometimes alone. Abu still said little, but he listened. He'd nod when I spoke, sometimes place a hand on my shoulder as I left, a silent apology in every touch. One day, as I was leaving, he finally said something. "I was afraid," he said without looking at me, "afraid I would lose control if I let you grow." I didn't respond. He added, "You didn't need me after all, but I needed you." It broke something in me and healed something else. "I needed you too," I said. "Back then." He nodded. "I know." And that was the most honest conversation we ever had. Time moved forward, as it always does. But now, it no longer dragged behind me like a chain. My visits home became less about confronting the past and more about quietly accepting it. My parents had changed, not in dramatic, tear-soaked ways, but in the subtle, fragile gestures that only come with age, reflection, and remorse. Ami began calling me once a week, always with a soft beta, "How are you?" before telling me what she cooked or asking about my health. Abu rarely spoke on the phone, but I knew he sat nearby, listening silently. I still lived in my apartment. I still ran meetings, led campaigns, trained new recruits, mentored interns. I didn't slow down. But now, when I went to bed, I didn't feel the same hollow ache in my chest. I wasn't fighting ghosts anymore. Then one day, a call came that shook me. Ali. His voice was shaking. "Amina, Ami's not well. She collapsed. They think it's her heart." I dropped everything. The next 2 days at the hospital were a blur of IVs, whispered prayers, restless pacing, and the constant smell of antiseptic. Ami lay in bed, pale and quiet, but alive. The doctor said she'd pulled through, but only just. Her body was tired, her heart weaker than they'd thought. I sat beside her, holding her hand. Her fingers curled around mine with surprising strength. "I was afraid I wouldn't get to see you again," she whispered, You're not leaving yet, I said, trying to smile. You still owe me 10 years of mothering. She chuckled, the sound weak but genuine. I wasted so much time, she said. Time I should have spent hugging you, encouraging you, protecting you. You taught me how to survive, I replied softly. Even if it came the hard way. Tears filled her eyes again. You became the kind of daughter I didn't deserve. I kissed her hand. You became the kind of mother I needed. Eventually. She recovered slowly, and I stayed longer than I planned. I cooked for her, brushed her hair, sat with her while she prayed. We didn't talk about the past anymore. We didn't need to. It was there, sitting quietly between us, but no longer in control. After she returned home, Abu changed too. He helped more, listened more, and for the first time in my life, he said something I never thought I'd hear. I'm proud of you. No conditions, no pride swallowed in silence. Just those 4 words. And they meant everything. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came a few weeks later. I received an invitation from the university. They were honoring alumni who had overcome adversity and gone on to lead in their fields. And they wanted me to speak. I almost said no. The idea of standing on that stage, returning to the place I once entered alone, felt too big, too painful. But Ali pushed me. You've earned this moment, he said. This is your full circle. So I agreed. The night of the ceremony arrived. I stood backstage in a navy blue sari, simple but strong, just like I had become. I looked out at the crowd, hundreds of students, professors, alumni, board members. Lights glowing, cameras flashing. And in the 3rd row, my family sat together. Ami, fragile but smiling. Abu, shoulders straighter than I'd ever seen. Ali beside them, beaming with pride. A decade ago, I walked into this university alone. Now, I was returning not just as a survivor, but as a symbol. When they called my name, the applause was thunderous. I walked onto the stage slowly, every step echoing 1,000 memories. At the podium, I looked out at the crowd, and then I spoke. When I first got accepted here, I thought my life was finally beginning. But I was wrong. That day, my life didn't begin. It broke. My parents told me I was on my own, that if I wanted this, I'd have to earn it myself. And I did. I worked 3 jobs, I skipped meals, I walked instead of taking buses. I studied at night and cried silently during the day. I didn't do it because I was brave. I did it because I had no other choice. The room was silent. But what they didn't know is that they gave me something more powerful than support. They gave me clarity. They showed me that no one was coming to save me. And so I saved myself. Peace. Because they were flawed. They failed me. But they were trying. And now I stand here not to ask for applause, but to tell anyone out there who feels abandoned, who's been told they aren't enough, you are. You are more than enough, and you don't need anyone's permission to rise. The audience rose with me, a standing ovation. As I walked off stage, I caught sight of Ami wiping her eyes. Abu clapped slowly, almost as if in disbelief. And Ali? He mouthed one word, legend. Later that night, after the event, we all sat together in my apartment. For the first time, it felt normal. No tension, no regret, just warmth, laughter, and stories we were finally ready to tell. Ami looked around my living room. You made a home, she said softly. Yes, I replied. And I made it without shortcuts. She reached out, touched my hand. You made us better too. That night when they left, I stood at the door watching them disappear down the hall. And I realized something I never expected to feel toward them. Murmurs of admiration moved through the crowd. I used to carry a lot of anger, but now I carry gratitude. Because through that pain, I found resilience. Through rejection, I discovered independence. Through silence, I learned the strength of my own voice. I paused. And sometimes that's enough. Weeks passed, then months. The ceremony faded into memory, but the shift it created inside me stayed. I no longer lived to prove anything to anyone, not to my parents, not to the world, not even to myself. I had proven enough. Now I lived to build, to nurture, to create something meaningful beyond survival. One evening, while working late at my desk, I received an email that made me stop breathing for a moment. It was from the university again. Only this time, they weren't inviting me to speak. They were offering me a position, assistant lecturer, a chance to teach the very subject that once kept me up at night, entrepreneurship. I stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly smiled. It wasn't just a job. It was a homecoming. When I told Ami, her eyes filled instantly. "You're going to teach? In the same place they once told you to walk away from?" I nodded. "Now I'll help others start the journey I once had to take alone." She kissed my forehead. "You're turning the pain into purpose." A few weeks later, I walked into my new classroom for the first time. 30 young faces looked back at me, eager, uncertain, full of questions and dreams. I started my first lecture with a single sentence written on the board: "Nobody is coming to save you, but you can still rise." And then I told them my story. Not the sugar-coated version. The real one. I told them about rejection, about betrayal, about eating dry bread for dinner and pretending it was enough, about walking home in the rain with wet socks and unpaid bills. But more importantly, I told them about victory, about building a life from scratch, about not just surviving, but thriving. One of the girls in the front row raised her hand after the class. "Ma'am," she said, "how did you not give up?" I looked at her, so young, so full of uncertainty, and replied, "Because no one else was going to do it for me, and because I knew I deserved more than a life built from fear." Teaching became a passion I hadn't known I needed. Every student I mentored, every presentation I marked, every scared, determined, unsure first-year girl I guided, it all felt like part of the healing I had once begged for. And in those quiet classroom moments, surrounded by chalk dust and ambition, I realized something else. I wasn't just building their futures. I was rewriting my own past. One where I wasn't abandoned, but redirected. One where I wasn't broken, but reforged. One where I wasn't unwanted, but unstoppable. Years slipped by like pages in a book you never meant to finish but couldn't stop reading. Life was steady now, not because it lacked challenges, but because I had learned how to face them without crumbling. My students often told me I was the strict one with the kind heart. I took that as the highest compliment. I pushed them hard, not because I wanted to break them, but because I knew how lonely it felt to walk into the world unprepared. I wanted them to be sharper, stronger, so no one could make them feel as small as I once did. I published my first book at 32. Burn the Map: How to Build a Life with No Directions. It wasn't just a story, it was my truth. Raw, real, sometimes painful, but always honest. It became a bestseller within months. Messages poured in from women across the country, some hiding in broken homes, some surviving toxic families, some just looking for a voice that sounded like theirs. They called me brave, but I wasn't brave. I was just finally free. I was invited to panels, TEDx events, podcasts. Suddenly, people who once told me to stay silent were quoting me in articles. One afternoon, I got a call from a national women's conference. They wanted to honor me with a Lifetime Resilience Award. I laughed when I heard it. "A lifetime already?" I joked. But when I received the award on stage, I looked into the crowd and saw Ami holding Abu's hand. They both stood as I was introduced. They clapped the loudest. And when I looked down at them, I didn't see the people who once abandoned me. I saw the people who had unknowingly lit the fire I used to guide myself. After the ceremony, Ami hugged me so tightly I thought she'd never let go. "You're more than we ever deserved," she whispered. I held her close. "You're exactly who I needed to become who I am." In that moment, I no longer saw my life in two parts, before and after the rejection. I saw it as one long, winding story, messy, unfair, but also magnificent. Ali graduated with honors. He started a nonprofit to help underprivileged students get access to education. He always said I lit the path for him, but now he was lighting paths for others. As for me, I started a scholarship in my name, the Amina Resilience Grant. Each year, one student, someone who'd been told no, someone written off by family or society, would get a full ride. No conditions, no judgment, just belief. And every time I handed that letter to a young girl with tears in her eyes, I thought of my 18-year-old self, alone, heartbroken, determined. She didn't know then that the world would one day bend around her strength, but I did now. Now, when I look back, not with anger, but with awe, I see a girl who stood in front of a locked door and refused to beg to be let in. Instead, she built a new house, brick by brick, tear by tear. And now, that house stands tall, unshaken, filled with light. I visit Ami and Abu more often now, not out of obligation, but by choice. We share meals, stories, laughter. There are still gaps in our relationship, wounds that never fully close, but there's also something stronger than all of it, a new beginning. One evening, Abu sat beside me as we watched the sun set over the city. His voice was soft, almost like he was speaking to the wind. You know, Amina, I thank Allah every day that you didn't listen to me. I smiled. I thank him too. And in that golden light, I finally felt it. Not just healing, not just closure, but peace. The kind you earn, the kind you fight for, the kind that tastes sweeter because it came from the bitterest places. This is my story. Of betrayal, of brokenness, of rising when I had no reason to. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're standing at your own locked door. Let me tell you something. Don't wait for them to open it. Build your own. You're not weak. You're not alone. You're not done. You are just getting started. And if this story touched your heart, even for a moment, then do one thing for me. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more real, raw, powerful stories like this. And share it with someone who needs to hear. Your pain can still become your power.